PJF Performance is not responsible for any of the dumb shit that I say. Tip number one that I learned from PJF Performance, and these are in no particular order, is that the tibialis anterior is not some miracle muscle. Now this one I already knew, but unfortunately, there's been a ton of trainers and coaches out there promising all of us that if we just do 1,000 tib raises a day for a week, that our wife will finally sleep with us again. Trust me, I've been trying it. It doesn't work. Now, these same trainers who promised me the love of a beautiful woman have promised all of you that tib raises are going to fix your knee pain and explode your vertical jump. Well, in episode 58 of the PJF Podcast, Paul explains that the tibialis anterior is in fact not some miracle muscle, and if you're going to obsess over any muscles in the lower limbs, it should be the soleus, the gastroc, the peroneals, the posterior tibialis, the FHL or the big toe muscle, and then the tibialis anterior. He also explains that while the anterior tibialis is a muscle in the lower limb that needs to be trained, you have to keep in mind that anytime that we are decelerating or doing single leg hops or anything that requires stabilization of the foot, that already has built-in training of the anterior tibialis. So tip number one from my man Paul is that if you have the time, go ahead and isolate the anterior tibialis, but don't expect it to be some miracle muscle that's going to transform your vertical jump, fix your knee pain, or get your wife to find you attractive. Tip number two that I learned from PJF Performance is to keep your high days high and your low days low. And no, this doesn't mean to hotbox the sauna or show up high on game day. He talks about that in episode 44 of his podcast.
We're actually high right now.
What he means is that you should have high intensity days and low intensity days, and you should try to combine all of your high intensity activities into the same session or at least into the same day so that all of the breakdown of the tendons, the muscles, and the central nervous system happens on that high intensity day, and then you leave the next day as a low intensity day for rest and recovery. Now, for example, in addition to me being a strength coach and performance trainer, I also coach a basketball team here at Carrick High School. Let's say that we had games on Tuesday and Thursday this week. I'm not gonna schedule our high intensity lower body workouts on the off days from our games, because then that means that every single day of the week would be high intensity. Instead, what I have them do is hit a low volume, high intensity strength workout directly before the games, and then we leave Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as low intensity days. Now we just went from crushing our body 5 times a week to crushing our body 2 times a week and leaving the rest of the days as low intensity days. And you could do the same exact thing with your skill sessions. You can combine your skills sessions with your workouts. Instead of having 2 windows of stress, combine them back to back into 1 window of stress and leave the rest of the time for rest and recovery. This is why most NBA players train on game day. They have so many games that they need that next day for recovery, and they don't want to be interrupting that recovery with another training session. Tip number 3, the 10,000 hour rule is a myth. Oh, some of you are gonna be pissed off about this one. See, I was pissed off too. I read 3.5 books on this topic and I thought I was an expert. How are you gonna tell me the 10,000 hour rule is a myth? Well, if you're not familiar, it's been cited in a ton of self-help books, most popularly Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and parroted by a bunch of bozos like me, that it takes about 10,000 hours to master any skill. So this means singing, dancing, painting, drawing, sports, athletics, playing an instrument, you name it. So what's the problem? The problem is that Anders Ericsson, the psychologist who developed the theory, later came back and said, no, you misinterpreted my work. There have been a ton of prodigies and individuals who have gained mastery well before the 10,000 hour mark. The real key is hours and hours and hours of deliberate practice. This machine's actually broken. Tricked you. And what is deliberate practice? Deliberate practice means actually practicing to get better, identifying your weaknesses and trying to correct them, and intentionally pushing outside of your comfort zone. See, now it makes sense why I sucked in high school. I would just go to the local rec center and put up random shots for an hour or 2 without any real intention or goal for that practice session. See, that's not gonna work. You have to be intentionally trying to improve your weaknesses and push outside of your comfort zone. Tip number 4, carbohydrates are fast twitch fuel. See, back when I was in high school, my biggest dream was to go to the NBA. But luckily for me, one of our rival schools had a player by the name of DeJuan Blair, who later went on to play for the San Antonio Spurs. Getting dunked on and sniffing the jockstrap of a 6'8", 280-pound man is very humbling. I realized very quickly, oh, That is how good you have to be to actually make it to the NBA. And like any skinny white kid does when his hoop dreams are crushed, you get pissed off at your mother for being white and you get pissed off at your father for being 5'11". But then you get into bodybuilding, which is exactly what I did. So my next big dream was that I wanted to become the greatest bodybuilder that ever lived. That wasn't until I realized that in order to compete at the highest level of bodybuilding, I was gonna have to inject a whole bunch of steroids into my ass. However, by far the most beneficial thing that I learned from bodybuilding was how to manipulate my proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And I spent a lot of time experimenting with different ratios of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates to try to figure out which would help me look the best and train the hardest. I also did an experiment where I ate 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So you know how most coaches recommend that you get 0.75, maybe 0.85, maybe all the way up to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Yeah, I was consuming 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. It was over 400 grams of protein every single day. And all that I remember is I built a lot of muscle, but it also took me 45 minutes to take a shit. Surely there's a point for me telling you about all my dead hopes and dreams that I was never able to achieve. Yes, one of the things that all explosive athletes need to understand is that carbohydrates are fast twitch fuel, and you need to treat yourself like a Ferrari. If you're gonna take that Ferrari out for a drive, then obviously you're gonna need some fuel. Whereas if the Ferrari is just gonna be sitting in the garage, then you don't need as much fuel, AKA carbohydrate. You have to fuel your body based on the activity that you're going to be doing. And if you're an explosive athlete like a basketball player, you have to remember that anytime that you're gonna jump, cut, sprint, or try to be powerful or explosive in any capacity, carbohydrates are fast twitch fuel. You literally need those carbohydrates to perform at the highest level possible. Tip number 5 is foot training. Now, I've been trying to sell my feet pics for years, but unfortunately, no one's buying them. But what I have been able to do is strengthen my feet and learn more about how to strengthen my feet with the help of PJF Performance. See, he explains that your feet are your first contact with the ground, and that affects everything up the chain, like your ankles, knees, and hips. And that is why it's important from time to time to take your shoes off, take your socks off, take some pictures, and then do some single leg hops to build your foot strength. What you want to do is start with 2 feet and go a bit slower, real random, unorganized, multi-directional hops. Then once that's pretty easy, you can go ahead and go a little bit faster. When that's easy, go slow with a single leg, unorganized, random, multi-directional hops. When that's a little bit easier, go a little bit faster. And what this is going to do is build that spring in the tendons, strengthen the muscles of your feet, expose your plantar fascia to more stress, and if you're doing barefoot training in the high school weight room like I am right now, there's a good chance that you'll get athlete's foot. So that's a bonus. Number 6, avoid huge spikes in load. See, I'm a little bit fat and out of shape right now, I'm not gonna lie, but back when I was 23 years old, and nobody gives a shit about what you used to do, but back when I was 23 years old, I had a 43-inch approach vertical jump. I was dunking everything. I also had debilitating knee pain. So back when I was jumping my absolute highest, half the time I couldn't even jump because my knees hurt so bad. Well, this is because I was overloading the shit out of my tendons. I would play basketball 7 days a week. I would train at volumes that not even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson should be training at. And then I would dunk everything that I possibly could. Then my knees would be killing me. I would rest for a couple of days, feel better, and then repeat the same cycle. It was like the cycle of abuse, except for that I was the abuser and the victim. So what should I have done? I should have slowly and gradually ramped up the load that I was placing on my tendons and my body in general. Paul Favorites recommends that you increase load by no more than 5 to 10% every single week. And this goes for training intensity, volume, the amount of minutes that you play per game, etc. Stay at 5 to 10% per week and increase week after week after week. And eventually you'll be playing and training at higher volumes and intensities pain-free. Number 7 is the importance of extensive plyometrics. And while we're talking about how much of an idiot I used to be, we have to talk about extensive plyo. See, if you would have told me back then to go do a bunch of low-level skips and hops, I would have said, stop it, don't be soft, let's go do some 40-inch depth jumps. Now you can see why I always got hurt. So going off of the last point, if our goal is to slowly ramp up load 5 to 10% each week, then the best way to slowly ramp up plyometrics is by starting with low-level extensive plyos and gradually working our way into high-level intensive plyos. This can be low-level skips, hops, bounds, forward running, backward running, jumping rope, you name it. But it's great for building spring in the tendons and decreasing the risk of overuse injuries. Very quickly though, I do want to mention that the more sport that you play, depending on the sport, the less extensive plyos that you're going to need. So for example, someone like me, a washed up 33-year-old who only plays basketball once a week in a church league to bust some dude's ass who works at PNC Bank, I'm going to need a lot more low-level extensive plyos than one of my high school athletes would who plays basketball every single day and already gets a bunch of unorganized low-level extensive plyometrics. Coming in at number 8, we have movement snacks. Now, because I have a 4-month-old baby and just because I like to make excuses, movement snacks are one of those things that I used to do all the time when PJF Performance first mentioned it, but it kind of fell off. Kind of like that kid who always used to make fun of you, but now you realize that he peaked in high school and you have the last laugh. Tommy Johnson. Hated that kid. I'm just kidding. He makes way more money than me and he's dating my ex-girlfriend, so there's that. Anyways, movement snacks don't mean that you sneak a couple of mini powdered donuts and move while you're eating them just to burn a couple calories. It means that at the top of every hour, you just do some very quick movement or mobility, about 1 to 3 minutes, putting your joints through a full range of motion just to keep yourself feeling good and moving well. See, the issue is that people are so inactive all day long that they feel super tight and locked up. Then they want to go do some flexibility or mobility training to help them loosen up. The key for movement snacks is that you're doing that quick mobility work before your body locks up and gets tight. Do this day after day after day and you end up feeling and moving better and improving your mobility in the process. And speaking of mobility, the 9th thing that I learned from PJF Performance is how to build mobility that actually translates to sports. See, most of us do a couple hip swivels and deep squats and we wonder why we lack mobility or we can't play low in sports. It's because you're fat. Well, actually, that's only part of the problem. But if you do have excess body fat, it is actively more dangerous for your body to be producing high forces at high speeds in those deeper ranges of motion, so your nervous system will stop you from getting as low simply because it just isn't as safe. But the main reason that you can't play low is because you don't have the ability to produce high forces at high speeds in those deep ranges of motion. So what you need to do is do your deep back squat and your slow strength in deeper ranges of motion, but then eventually you have to teach your body to produce high forces at high speeds in these deeper ranges of motion that you are not used to. This could be a seated penultimate drill or a half kneeling lateral bound, or even a deep tier squat jump. So the takeaways for this one, number 1, don't be fat. Number 2, do your slow strength at deeper ranges of motion. And then number 3, gradually introduce deeper range of motion work at faster speeds. And then last but not least, Paul Favorite says to stop stretching. I'm just kidding. He doesn't say that. But for all of you out there who think that stretching is gonna get you some crazy bounce or fix your knee pain, you and the tibialis anterior guys might as well get together and throw yourselves a tea party. So what PJF Performance actually says is that static stretching is not going to transform your bounce. It's not going to fix your knee pain. However, it can provide you with a window of time similar to foam rolling where you feel better putting your joints and your muscles through a full range of motion, in which then you can go and strengthen and train in those deeper ranges of motion, and that is where everything gets cemented. So the moment that you've all been waiting for, static stretching can be beneficial, it can also be harmful, but if it makes you feel better for a certain period of time, go crazy. Anyways, that's it for this top 10 on PJF Performance. Let me know who you want to see next down below in the comment section. And always remember, all of this is my interpretation of Paul Favorite's work. He is not responsible for any of the dumb shit that I said. Oh, and buy my vertical jump secret system. Link down below in the description.